Hi, this is Eric with Chicago Fly House. When we do our rigging seminars, sometimes we get asked, how do you make a cable of a certain length? You know, we talk about how to do the ends of the cable all the time, but we don't really talk about that very often. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to make a cable to a certain length. And we're going to do that using the components that we have here on the table. So what we're going to do is make a 2-foot length of cable out of this aircraft cable that we have in front of me. This is 1/8-inch galvanized aircraft cable, breaking strength of 2,000 pounds incidentally with these types of connections that we're going to do. Today we're going to use NicoPress sleeves, a NicoPress tool, and a NicoPress go gauge. You could obviously do this with Loco-Lock tools and Loco-Lock swages as well. So what we need to do is first start with an end. Okay, so I've already done that for you. I've already made one end on this cable. And you'll notice that all the things that should be part of a good connection are there. I have about a diameter's width of cable sticking out the end. I have about a half of diameter between the sleeve and the thimble, which allows the thimble to move a little bit. We don't want that too tight. So all that checks out, all that looks good. And I've used my go gauge to double check that connection to make sure that all the presses were done properly. So we're good on this end. So now what we need to do is we need to mark our cable. And this is the trick to making a cable of a certain length. If we want this cable to be 2 feet long, we're going to lay out our tape measure, and we're going to put our end of our tape measure at the load-bearing point on the thimble. Notice that when we load something on the thimble, it loads on the inside of the thimble. That's the load-bearing point on the thimble. So that's where we're going to measure to. Okay? And with this tape measure, I'm actually going to what we call burn an inch. It helps us be a little bit more accurate. So I'm going to put that at the 1-inch mark right inside the thimble. Then I'm going to lay this out against the tape measure here, and I'm going to mark at 25 inches. Because I burned 1 inch, I'm going to mark at 25 inches to give me my 2 feet. So I'm going to mark right here and mark around the cable. Okay. So now I have a mark at 2 feet. And if I make my cable to that mark, I'll be pretty close to 2 feet. It's not going to be exact, and I'll explain why when we get to the end. So now that I have my cable marked, I'm going to get rid of my tape measure here. I'm going to set my sleeve over the cable. And at this point, if we wanted to, we could cut some of the excess, but I'm going to leave it long for now. And I'm going to find my mark. Here's my mark. And I'm going to put my thimble in. And when I put my thimble in, what I want is for the cable, the mark that I put on the cable, to be right at the bottom of the teardrop of that thimble. Okay? That means that I'm now in line between this point on the thimble and this bearing point on the other thimble. So this is where it's not exact. We're going to be within 1/8 of an inch if we do this right. The thickness of the cable essentially, and a little bit of the thimble. But for most applications, this is great. And if you're making 2 cables to match together, they're still going to match. Okay? So now we've got that. We're going to go ahead and press it. I've got my dot still there. It's still there. I'm going to have a little bit of room between the thimble and the sleeve, and I'm going to hold the end of the sleeve here. I'm going to take my tool. I do a slightly different method of compression. I don't put it on the table. I put it under my armpit here. And I'm able to look at the sleeve and control it and do one press. And the way I do this is I'll go from the thimble down towards the end. There's a few different ways you can do these. There's various recommendations on NicoPress's and Loco-Lock's website. The one thing you don't want to do is do your ends and do the middles last. That's bad. So I've done 3 presses for this. For this particular tool, it's 3 presses. I've got a little bit of wiggle with the thimble, which is what I want, so about a half wire rope diameter there. Now I'm going to check with my gauge and see that that works great. It's going over it properly. And I'm just going to double check here. Double check my measurement from bearing point to bearing point. And I can see it's right at 2 feet. We're on the money. So that's one way of making a cable to a known length. Obviously, when you're done, if you have a long tail, you can go ahead and snip it like I just did. If you want, you can take some E-tape and wrap it around it to clean it up. If you have to make a bunch of them, you have to make more than 2 or 3 or 4, you might want to set up a jig on a table. You could put a couple screws 2 feet apart and build the cable around those screws. They'll be that same length for every single cable that you build on it. It's actually a really simple thing to do. Well, thanks for listening today. I'll see you next time.